The unknown.
Welcome to the Voice of the People with your host, November Hanson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live global broadcast of Voice of the People Radio. I'm hearing some feedback. Hopefully that goes away. For all the listeners on the various internet venues around the world, to all the ones on 105.7 FM in New Orleans, and those using their cell phones with UpSnap, I am pleased you could join us. A featured guest list is on my website at voiceofthepeopleradio.com. Couple of short announcements. One is a lovely lady. I've actually met her. She's been on my program a couple of times. Dr. Linda Bachman. She's developed a new class. It's for people who are interested in past life regressions. It's called Spiritual Guide Regression Training, which begins on January 11th. It is a 4-week telecourse, and Linda only takes 9 participants. So the classes are quite small, lending themselves to considerable dialogue and discussion. If you're interested in participating or just want to see who Dr. Linda Bachman is and opportunities she offers, you can visit www.ravenheartcenter.com. I am still working on the Now Project, which is a personality trait survey located on the ICAR website, and I'm still working on the second piece of the Mosaic Project, which has to do with people who have had reptilian experiences. You can fill out the form that is also on the ICAR site, which is www.icar1.com. Tonight, my guest is author Jim Elvidge. I've had Jim on the program before. He has a book called The Universe Solved. He holds a master's degree in electrical engineering from Cornell University. He has applied his training in the high-tech world as a leader in technology and enterprise management, including many years in executive roles for various companies and entrepreneurial ventures. He also holds 4 patents in digital signal processing. Beyond the high-tech realm, however, Elvidge has years of experience as a musician, writer, and truth seeker. He merged his technology skills with his love of music, developed one of the first PC-based digital music samplers, and co-founded Radio AMP, the first private label online streaming radio company. For many years, Jim has kept pace with the latest research, theories, and discoveries in the varied fields of subatomic physics and cosmology. His website, which is a really amazing website, is www.theuniversesolved.com. That way you can go look at it as we're talking, and if you have any questions, the people in the virtual auditorium, you're more than welcome to post them there. Jim, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, November, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to come back on the show.
Well, I'm very excited to have you. What I wanted to do, Jim, just right off in the beginning, for listeners who may not have heard you on the program before, is to kind of give us a definition of your theory of a program reality.
Okay, yeah, sure. Great way to start. Always new listeners and new people to describe these things to. Basically, the idea of a programmed reality is very similar, although not identical, to what people might have seen in movies like The Matrix or 13th Floor. So the idea that everything that you perceive is under some sort of program control, or it's generated by some computational mechanism. So it's a very kind of different way of looking at things. And, initially people often think of that as something that's, kind of out there, very unlikely. They're used to feeling grounded in reality, and they're used to the stuff that they interact with being real and solid, and this idea that maybe we're really living out a simulation of some sort is a very foreign concept. However, the purpose of the book really is to present all of the evidence that this might be the case. I myself don't 100% agree with it, but I tend to think that there's an awful lot of evidence that points in this direction. And when you kind of digest all of the evidence, you start looking at the world a little bit differently. You start thinking about the past and how your intent can influence future events, and how coincidences happen, and how the scientific process happens, and all kinds of things like that make a little bit more sense. So that's it in a nutshell. And there are an awful lot of different avenues of this theory that people can explore, as evidenced by all the number of topics on the website and the forums that we have there. People talk about all kinds of different things.
Right. And like I said, I've been there. It is a really, I was on there today even, amazing site. Jim, so programmed reality, you know what? The question just totally went out the back door. How did that happen? Where's my paper and pen? As you're talking, sometimes I always have a question to what somebody's saying, and I got sidetracked on something else. But
I could certainly jump in, and maybe you'll think of it as we talk. There are really kind of two different mechanisms for this, two different possible mechanisms. One is the sort of matrixy type of mechanism where the individuals that interact with each other in what we call the real world are kind of like avatars. So think of it as we're playing out some sort of simulation, and in reality there's no way to tell the difference between reality and a simulation. People have had dreams that seem extremely real, and people have real experiences that seem kind of dreamlike. And when you think about it, this is all just generated by your consciousness. Where is your consciousness, and how is it getting its information about the things that we think are real, the things that you see, the things that you hear, and everything, are just coming through our senses and being processed by our brain. Consciousness probably somewhere else, though. So, when you think about it this way, you realize that dream states, waking states, alternate states that people have all kind of blend together, and there is not necessarily a grounded reality. And the second type of mechanism for a possible programmed reality is a physical one. Now, believe it or not, we're actually pursuing the kinds of technologies that allow us to create anything from building up structures of atoms and molecules. So, for example, you could imagine you put something in a microwave and press a couple buttons and it gets done. Well, in the future, there will be devices called molecular assemblers that effectively follow a program and compile material from individual components like atoms and molecules. So you might be able to create meat, for example, or create a glass or a sofa or something like that. A lot of these ideas are talked about by people in the nanotech field, because that's the level of detail that you need to get to in order to implement some of these kinds of mechanisms. But ultimately, if we keep going with this, there's no reason why you can't create a physical reality programmatically through such a device. It's probably in our future within a few hundred years, maybe less. So therefore, it's possibly there already.
Basically, nanofactories.
Exactly.
Which opens up a door to a whole host of different things that mankind could do, not just on our own planet. Wow. Jim, when you were coming up with the idea, developing the programmed reality universe, what inspired you? I mean, was it just some aha moment, you know what, I think, and this is what I want to explore? Or was there just a series of things that really made you, start thinking about the idea that we could actually live in a programmed reality?
I guess a combination of the both, November. Certainly, over the last 20-plus years, I've read and kind of consumed everything I can get my hands on about artificial intelligence and physics and the nature of reality and cosmology and quantum mechanics and all of those kind of heavyweight scientific types of things. Although I'm not a scientist by trade, I'm an engineer. I've always had the interest in these, and I took a lot of physics classes in school, so I've maintained that. But at the same time, I've also been eerily drawn to alternate views of things, alternate views of archaeology, alternate views of human history or the history of the Earth, alternate views of cosmology, and in viewing or in reading about those kinds of things, I came across paranormal investigations, those kinds of ideas that I didn't learn about in school and that I didn't initially pursue. And the blend of these things is really what provided the foundation for the book. The aha moment came when I first started writing the book. I was writing more about relativity and Albert Einstein's theories and how that might break down someday. And as I was doing my research, I was really realizing, wow, there's an even bigger picture here, which is all of this evidence that that we are in some sort of designed world, and it needs to be under a programmatic mechanism.
And it wouldn't just be a designed world. It's actually the entire universe or universes. We could use plural.
Yeah, exactly, sure. In fact, if you think about it, we don't have to design out things that we don't see. We don't have to design remote galaxies or distant galaxies, or certainly not the stars and the planets on those galaxies that we can't, individually identify. Prior to the 1600s, we didn't have to necessarily design out anything about other planets in our own solar system. We only started investigating those once the telescope was invented. So over the years, we have expanded our scope of reality and expanded our scope of investigation from a scientific standpoint, but we did that all through our senses, and we did that all through sort of, observations and observational intent. So you go back to that old philosophical question, when a tree falls in the woods, do you hear anything? And that question can be applied elsewhere. When nobody has seen what's on the opposite side of the moon, does it exist? Is anything there? And believe it or not, physics tells us that the answer to that question is no, nothing exists until you observe it. And these kinds of answers come from very detailed scientific experiments done in the quantum mechanics field. And there's an assumption that if that's the case at the kind of particle and microscopic level, then it's also probably the case at the macroscopic level. That whole idea that the observer is part of reality is really core to redefining reality. If it requires an observer for something to actually be real, as science, the best scientists tell us today is the case, if that's really true, then somehow something is tapping into our existence, our observational intent, and modifying the world, modifying our reality based on that intent and based on our observations. Well, what could that be? What is it that could be reading our intent or our presence or our ability to observe something? One possibility, again, is this computational mechanism. If we are tapped into it, our brain can actually be read. There are a lot of studies going on these days where brain-computer interfaces have been designed, and people can, under experiments, be shown objects, and by reading the output of the electrical signals that our brain creates, they can determine what objects are being seen. So we know this is possible, and it seems to be happening on a cosmic level, that our observations and our intent is actually being read somehow, and then the results are changes in how reality goes, and in the direction of reality, and the direction of of our experiences changes as a result of that. And so that's heavy evidence for something like this programmed reality idea.
So then could we actually, as an entity of consciousness, exist someplace else, and we actually programmed this experience? Or let's see, yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, exactly. There's no reason why we couldn't. We're working on doing that now in this reality, whatever it is. We are working on doing exactly that anyway. When we go to movies, we're immersing ourselves, to a moderate extent into a different reality. You've gotten engrossed in a movie, one that's well done, that's on a big screen, that has great sound system. I'm sure you've gotten as engrossed as I have, gotten scared, felt your heartbeat pounding, because you start to be a little bit immersed in that experience. Well, virtual reality is all about pushing the boundaries of that and providing experiences that are even more real by using goggles or headphones or gloves that give you the tactile sensations. And these kinds of things are being done in the labs these days. I read something just a couple of weeks ago about a new technology, which is a little bit of a rehash of an old technology, which was called smell-o-vision. Back in the 50s or 60s, they were experimenting with the idea of adding dimensions essentially to the movie-going experience. Rather than just seeing and hearing it, wouldn't it be cool if you could smell the gunpowder when there was an explosion on the screen? So these experimental theaters would eject some scents that people could smell, but what happened was it all kind of mixed together, and it got gross, and it took too long for it to dissipate. But they now have mechanisms using the same kind of technology that printers use, inkjet technology, which can generate tiny little streams of particles that can stimulate your olfactory nerves and allow you to smell things. So, we are pushing this technology to the point where we want to get more and more immersive fantasy experiences. There will be a point in time where we break away from these kind of crude devices like goggles and gloves and headphones and speakers, and instead tap directly into the conscious pathways of our brains through either implants or some other nanobots or some other mechanism. We will get to that point maybe 20, 30 years from now. So when we do that, we will be able to create these simulated experiences, and at that point, we won't be able to tell the difference, because we will be able to drive all of the sensory experiences in our brains that we currently have being driven by, the quote, real senses, or the real, visual inputs and stimuli that are out there now.
It's going to make for a very strange world. I think about the technology that we have today and how, I don't want to really say necessarily obsessed, but it's changing our world as far as where we spend time doing things. And I think about, getting into the future in a holographic world. At what point in time will we not even need human interaction anymore? I mean, I wanted to think that could never happen. I'm not so sure anymore.
Oh, I'm not sure at all. I've been noticing, and I'm sure you have too, how more detached people get as time goes on. It used to be you walk down the street in the city and, you say hello to people, maybe interact with them. Even total strangers might do that at times. But now everybody has their iPod going or they're interacting with a phone or some digital device that makes them just one more step removed from other people. how often do you see people standing in an elevator and out of nervousness or I don't know what, they pull out their phone to check for email. It happens all the time. People using social networks are doing things that are one step removed from real interaction. I'm not sure it's necessarily a bad thing. It's a different thing. Technology, the Industrial Revolution changed us tremendously. Technology changed us tremendously. The computer and the Internet have changed us tremendously. And this kind of technology is also going to change us tremendously. We are going to be more detached. We are going to interact with people in different ways. And, we will be doing more fantasy simulations, I think. And I think that's just inevitable.
Oh, I would agree. Well, I think what really made me stop to think about that is it was really just a couple of weeks ago. I was in the grocery store, and it was fairly crowded. There was one woman on her cell phone having a conversation with, I would never imagine having that kind of personal conversation in a store where everybody could hear, but she was. Another lady was on her cell phone with the two kids asking about what kind of cereal, and then there was a couple kids doing their text messaging. As I was walking through the store, I thought, you know what? It's like I'm not even here. This is kind of cool in some ways.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, people are experiencing multiple lives at the same time, effectively. They've got their online life that they carry with them, and then their real life that, that they experience as they walk around and interact with other people. And they bounce back and forth between these two and sometimes try to do the same at once. I work in the high-tech industry, and, I see people in meetings. It's very rare when everybody in a meeting pays attention to the presenter or the person who's talking. People have their laptops open, they've got their iPads out, their iPhones or whatever, and, there's all this side interaction going on, so people are only kind of partially paying attention. It's multitasking to the max, and that's just the way it's going to go. There was an interesting book. I don't know if you've ever read this. Did you ever read a book by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash?
No, I haven't.
It was very prophetic, I think. He wrote it back in the early 90s, I believe, before the Internet. Well, not before the Internet, but before the web. And they had an idea of the web in this book, and people would, I think the term he used was goggle in. So they had their own, reality outside of this, what was called the metaverse, and then people would goggle into the metaverse where they would play out a completely different life. You might be a swashbuckling adventurer in the metaverse, or you might be a drug dealer or a musician or something completely different than what you were in your day-to-day life. And people would spend a lot of their time in this virtual world experience. And the book was really about kind of a spillover between these two realities, but I was always fascinated with the idea and kind of drawn to the idea, and it's been interesting over the past 15 years since that book came out, just watching us, hurtle in that same direction.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've actually found myself kind of wanting to pull back from technology a bit lately, just because, I don't know, just the observations. People, it's like, I don't know, sometimes it's like you don't exist. You try to have a conversation with somebody and they're sitting there texting on their cell phone, or you're trying to have another conversation, they're looking for something to buy on eBay, and it's, whoa, it's like, okay, hello. Hello, so that's what you want to say. Geez, I guess I'll have to get in there and, put myself on eBay just to get some attention.
Exactly.
But, and what you were saying about the meeting, that's just rude. Seriously, if somebody's doing presentation, at least you would think, we learn in school, that you give them your attention. I guess my concern there would be the trickle-down effect. Okay, so if the person in the meeting, whatever corporate meeting it is, isn't giving the speaker their full attention, they're not getting all the information from the speaker. You get further down the line to, say, a high school, if the student's busy with their cell phone out of their pocket, seeing who just texted them, they're not getting all the information either. So could we have an educational breakdown because of it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I see this happening all the time. It is rude and disrespectful in a lot of ways, but as it becomes more, quote, acceptable, I guess, then I think it's less rude in a lot of people's minds to do that. And what people are doing is sort of time slicing their attention. And this is it's actually the way a computer works, too. When you have a number of different applications up on your computer, the computer isn't doing all of those things at one time. It's doing them in tiny little increments in such a way that you think it's doing them all in one time. You could be watching a movie on a program that is able to encode movies, and it looks very seamless and very smooth, but at the same time, your computer could be processing a data file or doing something else, and that's what people are doing now. They'll listen to a sentence of something that they hear in a meeting, and then they will check an email or glance over at their laptop and maybe respond to something, and hopefully their short-term memory has retained what they've picked up. So what I'm seeing, and I think you probably are too, is that it's not very effective. And in reality, you're only getting part of the information. You're missing bits and pieces, and so you're learning less. People are imparting less information to each other. They're kind of spreading out what all of the stimuli they're getting during the day, and I think when that happens in schools, that's really a place for it to call a halt to it.
All right. Well, then you'll think like me, because I see this type of thing going on all the time, and it does. And not that I'm so concerned about it right now. I'm looking at future implications as we become less and less, connected. I mean, there's also a financial thing here, too. You talk about schools, colleges, universities, that type of thing. It costs a certain amount of money to maintain staff, to maintain a building, to maintain just those classrooms with all the desks and the 30, 40, 50 bodies in them, depending on where you're at in the educational system. It is more cost-effective to have online classes. It's more cost-effective to, have, sort of a virtual classroom. And there's a lot of places going to it. I mean, I know there's places where you can do high school online and get an actual high school diploma.
Yeah, I didn't know that about high school, but certainly most universities provide that possibility now. The same courses that you can take in person, oftentimes you can take online, and in my mind, it's a little bit watered down. You're not getting the real experience. You don't get the opportunity to interact with the professors, the instructors, or even the other students. If a concept is not clear, you can't ask for clarification. So, I think it's it's definitely kind of a watering down effect for education.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know, though, that's where society is going. I mean, we're redefining language, we're redefining social etiquette, we're redefining a lot of different things based on our technology and the evolution of it. And right now it's evolving pretty fast, so then we have to adapt pretty fast, too, which will lead me back to the program universe. Would part of the program be us adapting to the part of the program to create our own program? I mean, wrap your mind around this sometime in the future. Wow.
Yeah, it does get very complex very quickly when you start thinking about these things. I kind of view it this way, that yes, there are these changes. There are changes in socialization and changes in education, changes in technology, changes in the kind of work that people are doing. They're being forced out of some kinds of jobs and forced to retrain for other kinds of jobs. And that, to me, is really probably not too different than what's been going on at maybe a slower pace for many, many years, many hundreds of years. This certainly happened during the industrial age, and it happened when, with the advent of computers back in the 50s and 60s, it's just continuing now, and it seems to be continuing at a faster pace. So if we are manufacturing our reality through observation, we're doing this, and we're driving this. And interestingly, I think our brains and our systems are adapting to it in some ways. I think we're getting better, perhaps, at multitasking than we used to because it's being forced on us. One of the things that I've thought a lot about is the idea of paranormal is probably not the right word, but kind of supernormal experiences and supernormal capabilities that people have. I think that that the brain may kind of lock these things away for a while, and we either may be training our brain to support them, or we may be unlocking them as we move forward. One example that has come up recently is the placebo effect. The placebo effect is a known effect in medicine where if an individual is given a pill that they think will have a particular effect, chances are pretty good it will have that effect, even if there's nothing in there to really have the effect. In fact, a lot of the medicines that are pushed by big pharmaceutical companies these days, they actually don't perform any better than a placebo. I think some of the mood-altering drugs are fall into this category. And what scientists have noticed is that this effect, this placebo effect, is actually getting stronger over the last 5-10 years. And that, to me, is a really interesting result, because what is the placebo effect? It's all about intent. It's all about your mind creating reality and creating changes in your body, based on your intent and based on your expectations. If that's increasing, then we are improving our ability to control ourselves in that way. Don't you think? I mean, it's kind of.
You know what? I can give you a good example of the placebo effect. I live in Oregon, and Oregon made a law that you could not. I'm trying to think of the one drug I want to particularly focus on. Oh, shoot! It's a cold pill. It's a little red pill. Anyways, I'll think of it in a minute. Why can't I think of it? Anyways, Oregon can no longer sell this drug if it has a particular ingredient in it. And the reason why is because meth labs.
Is it pseudoephedrine?
Yes, that's the one. So we cannot have medicines in Oregon that have that particular drug in it because people were buying them off the shelves for meth labs. And which, by the way, it did actually work taking it out, because instead of having 100 meth labs, we had 10 in a year. So it did work. But I had went to the doctor last year for a cold. Any of the medications I was taking over the counter, it wasn't working. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'd taken it in the past and it was fine. And the doctor basically told me that the cold medication in Oregon is nothing more than a placebo. He says, sure, it lists all these different ingredients in it, but the ingredient combined with those that would help alleviate the symptoms was taken out.
So the active ingredient's gone.
Right. The active ingredient was gone. So, but the cold medicines are still being sold.
Oh my gosh.
So I mean, people must, be getting something out of it. I mean, we discovered here we weren't, so we have to go to Washington to get our cold medicine. But, anyways, I thought that was when the doctor told me that. I'm like, what?
Very interesting.
That's wicked, though.
It is.
I mean, they're selling all those drugs that don't even have anything in them that can do anything for you. I don't know.
Amazing. The case that always astounded me was there was an individual who had cancer, and I forget what the form of cancer was that he had contracted, but his doctor told him that he was going to give him some medication that was an experimental drug, and he gave him this drug, and I believe the drug was actually a placebo because this was part of a study that was being done. And the cancer went into remission. And then he read online that this experimental drug was actually not as effective as they had originally thought it was. This is the patient reading this. And his cancer came back because now he realized he had just taken something that really hasn't been proven to be that effective. So his cancer came raging back. The doctor said to him, okay, you're right, this drug is, not, it's not proven, but for your particular case, this is perfect. All these other cases are what they're talking about in these articles. So, in other words, he, again, mentally convinced him that he was taking something that was, directly, positively affecting his condition, and, that mental expectation turned it around again. So, if a placebo can impact cancers, being in remission or not being in remission, that's a very, very strong effect.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've been hearing about that for years, too. Interesting enough, though, that maybe it's the actual effects getting stronger.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I think there's something to it, something along the lines of the training of the brain, as we talked about before, or the training of consciousness. It's kind of like I remember learning from psychology class about conditioning. If you use behavioral conditioning, you slowly improve your correlation between the behavior and the conditioned response. The same thing happens, I think, with the placebo effect. If you realize that your intent is positively affecting your outcome, then it's going to kind of feed on itself, and it will tend to, promote that kind of connection going forward even more.
Right. Okay, so let's switch here for just do something simple. How would the idea of a ghost work in the program reality?
Those kind of things are actually fairly simple to describe, believe it or not. So, the idea of a ghost, for example, is it's an apparition that that's seen by an individual or maybe multiple individuals. One of the things that's kind of interesting about ghost sightings and cryptozoology sightings and things like that is that it's not always seen by multiple people. Sometimes you can have 5 individuals, one of whom sees it and the others don't. But then there are other times when people's experiences corroborate each other. Well, what can explain that in a programmed reality is that the program, again, is aware of the capabilities of each person in the room. So let's imagine we have let's use a video game analogy. There's 5 characters in the video game, and everybody's playing them, and they have their avatar. And programmatically, the program injects a ghost in front of them. And the ghost can be created, obviously it can be created programmatically in any way. It could be partially invisible. It could be, could have whatever characteristics you want it to have that follow the, capabilities of the program. And it could also allow one or more of the people to observe it. So it doesn't have to be everybody observing it. That's under programmatic control. So, again, your consciousness is, if your consciousness is being intercepted by a computational mechanism, so everything that you're perceiving is being processed, and then what you're told you perceive is coming out of that process, you could be told you're seeing anything. A ghost, a UFO, Bigfoot, any of these kinds of things. And it doesn't mean they're not there any more than it means things that you dream about are not there, or things that you think you're feeling when you touch them aren't there.
Yes. So they would be just as real as you or I sitting here because it was all part of the same program.
Exactly. And I would recommend that for anybody who's kind of interested in exploring this a little further, there's a great book called Biocentrism by Robert Lanza, who's he's a PhD from some Ivy League institution. I forget which one. It might be Yale or Princeton. But in any case, he's a biologist. He's studied stem cells. He's done tremendous research. But I mean, he also has this theory that everything is created by your consciousness. And he's a full believer in the idea that we are creating our own reality. So it's not just, I put the programmatic spin on it because that explains it to me. It explains all of the different categories of evidence. But there are a lot of other people in the scientific community, in the metaphysical community, in spiritual communities who have come to the same conclusion, from a different direction.
Right. Could we program a new discovery? Or could it, let me rephrase that, could a new discovery have already been programmed into the video game? I don't know what you want to call into our reality.
One of the things I'm not sure about, I'm not sure about any of this, but, there's a couple ways that you can go there. One could be that there's a belief system that our souls are separate from our bodies, and that in afterlife or in a different realm we design our lives. And I'm sure you're aware of this from Buddhist teachings, from Edgar Cayce, from people who do past life regressions, all kinds of different sources of this belief system. Well, in that system, you design a life, and so the question is, what about free will? Where does free will play into this? If you actually design out everything that happens in your life, then there's almost no room for free will. But I think about it, I guess, a little bit differently in that you can design out things that you expect to have like sort of a template, but you can have free will to make the very detailed items actually occur. So maybe it's a matter of the next few minutes your free will is playing 90% of the role of what happens over the next few minutes, but the grander scale interactions that you're going to have in your life and the experiences that you're going to have in your life could be something that you programmed out. And the way that might work is, let's say that one of the things that you're supposed to do is, travel the world. Well, it's not hard for the program to put those kinds of decisions in your path so that it's very easy for you to make the decisions to follow down those paths, if you see what I mean.
Yes, I do see what you mean. Okay, so what about, I guess when I said that I was thinking about NASA's big announcement this last week about the bacteria that was arsenic-based life form, and I've read some on it. I haven't had a whole lot of time to read a whole lot about it, but somebody was telling me on a news program that they were watching that they said that the DNA was different than, anything else on Earth. So whether or not they just discovered a new life form on Earth, or it was something that hitched a ride from something out in the universe, or if you believe in panspermia, we all came from out there anyways. I guess my thought is that, we have had the mindset that we go searching for life, with specific conditions. And so now we have this new discovery, which really opens up a whole gateway of how to go exploring for life and not limiting it to certain, there has to be water, there has to be, certain types of conditions.
Yeah,
so did we program the discovery?
I
see where I'm going?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're right on the money in the way that you're thinking about this. I've often thought about how the scientific method works and why we keep on discovering more and more things that really make everything more complex. And, again, if you think about the programmed reality model, this all kind of makes sense. It's not, I won't say it's a game that we're playing, because that kind of undermines maybe the seriousness of our reality. But, it is something that we're involved with that has a purpose, and we continue to, just as we evolve, just as we get smarter, we continue to expand upon this reality and probe its richness. So how does that work? I think, again, that this is kind of rooted in the nature of the observer effect. It's an agreed-upon, proven effect, but it's very incompatible with the idea that there are mysteries out there just waiting to be uncovered and solved, because the observer effect says that nothing exists until you observe it. So there can't be mysteries out there, or artificial life out there, or life that is of a different, DNA form, just waiting to be discovered and solved. Instead, it's our consciousness that creates this. Take Newtonian mechanics, for example. That was the old, way of doing physics up until Einstein came along and totally threw a wrench into how everybody thought about the way the world worked. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't that the end of scientific inquiry? It was sufficient. It explained everything that we observed. It was self-consistent. The only things that I think, it might have been lacking was, where did these stars come from that we're seeing in the sky? But that could have all fit into the model somewhere. There could have been a very simple way to fit into the model. But no, we kept on probing. We kept on digging deeper, developing instruments that would probe, deeper into the atom, bombarding molecules with, bombarding gold foil with molecules, as Ernest Rutherford did, and seeing that some of them bounced straight out. So he discovered the nucleus by doing that, continuously observing. And as we did, we create the more complexities to our reality. We've created the nature of the atom. The fact that we experiment with it means that we're now asking for it to have some structure. The fact that we start experimenting with outer space and looking at things like the cosmic background radiation means that we have to modify our reality to fit that. We have to now come up with an explanation for it, which was the Big Bang theory. Well, the Big Bang wasn't due to the cosmic background, but you see what I'm saying.
That we're constantly programming our reality through observation.
Exactly.
Because we're always observing something that we didn't see before. It might not fit into a particular model, so then we have to go looking for the new model, which in turn, and it just... And imagine if maybe the way the program works is that it detects how many people are thinking about something, like, if we found a different form of DNA on the Earth, that would really give us an indication that life forms more easily in our universe than we thought before. Wouldn't that be great? Maybe the way the program works is that when you get a sufficient number of people thinking those kinds of thoughts, that's the way the reality gets created. That's the way the discovery happens. Because of observation.
Because of the intricacies of the algorithm in this, cosmic program.
Actually, it kind of reminds me of a fractal, too, because the discoveries actually radiate out into all different kinds of fields. They were astrobiologists. Mm-hmm. Well, I can see applications in the space industry. I could see applications in SETI. I could see applications in bioengineering. I could see applications in medicine with their discovery. So just from that one little teeny discovery, it could radiate out into a whole host of other areas.
Absolutely.
And that happens all the time, though. I mean, we sent man into space, discoveries that were made there created, things for us here in medicine and, just in our everyday life, things that we utilize. So, gosh, I don't know. Do we get to the point where our brains just go, I can't handle it anymore, shut the program down? I don't know, I would hope not, but...
No, well, it hasn't happened yet, and, also you might want to ask yourself the question of, how long has this really been going on? There's, again, no way to tell. The past is something that, this is another thing that I've been doing some research on, which I've just found particularly fascinating, is that the past is not as set in stone as we used to think it was. Scientists have proven that you can actually change the past.
Jim, it can't be, because all the observations of the past could not have been made. The only thing that we know about the past, really, is by what was left behind from those before us. Now, with the exception of, so the people from science don't get too excited here, we do have fossils and ice core samples and those types of things that we can use modern technology to kind of get an idea of what was going on, or maybe even, almost completely prove. I don't know how you can prove it without the actual observation that T-Rex was X feet tall and he had, green skin or whatever shaped teeth he had, that type of thing. And so that is something about the past, like you said. There's no way for us to really know what happened in the past for sure, because we weren't there to observe it all. Exactly. We only have what was passed down to us from whatever was left behind, which wasn't a whole lot.
You're right, and the past is two things. It's artifacts and it's memories. And our memories are clearly not perfect, and our short-term memory really is only 30 seconds long or something like that. So we base our understanding of the past mostly on artifacts like newspapers, documents, books, microfiche, whatever it is that has documented the past. Well, if all that stuff is under programmatic control, it can be changed. And turns out that our memories can actually be changed too. They've recently done experiments with mice where they have selectively erased memories in mice. The mice learned certain things, maybe in a maze that they were running or whatever, and they were able to find out where those memories were stored and selectively erase them. So, again, if our consciousness is really, in control of this whole thing, and our experiences are really coming through a simulated reality, all of that can be changed, and the past can be changed and made self-consistent with all the artifacts very easily. You have to admire the complexity of this program. What we talked about before, the ability to react to mass intent or kind of mass consciousness effects and allow us to go down certain scientific avenues of inquiry. That it's such a complicated thing. We can't even comprehend how it would work. Again, if this is the way reality works. So anything that complicated is certainly capable of swapping out some artifacts and changing things around. There's a quantum mechanics experiment called the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, and they found that actually proves that an interference pattern can be recovered even if the information is erased after the particles hit the detector. So it's changing the past, something that the physicists actually do in the experiment can change the result of something that already happened.
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't read that one either. I think probably the latest articles I read were the one where they were able to send information into the past. Of course, we're talking, nanoseconds, and it was just a little teeny piece of information, but it was a step. Anyways, Jim, I got to stop there. We are at the top of the hour. Everybody, you're listening to Voice of the People Radio on the Paranormal Radio Network, and we're going to be right back.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Are you a fan of the unknown? Do you constantly watch the skies, wondering if there's something out there, in fear of things going bump in the night?
Whispers Radio brings you head first into the world of the paranormal with the latest news and interviews with the paranormal elite. With hosts Jordan Klein and Nick Queen, you are sure to be consumed in the world of ghosts, UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracy theories, and the unknown. So check out Whispers Radio every Tuesday night, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 7 Central. And give us a call, 1-866-514-1600. Visit us at www.whispersradio.com.
Are you interested in a radio program that focuses on the deeper aspects of the UFO topic? Would you like to explore the facts and truths of what ufology and UFO research are all about? Then please join us here every Saturday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central for Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis, with your host, D. Andrew, right here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Remember, UFO research is not a belief system.
This radio station broadcasts programs dealing with UFOs, aliens, New Age, and the paranormal. Check out our... Hi, I'm Gia Scott. I'm the host of this really cool little radio program on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. It's called The Dawn of Shades. I bring in a wide variety of guests, and we talk about all sorts of things. Some of them are authors, some of them are experiencers, but it's all paranormal. Do tune in to The Dawn of Shades from 7 to 9 p.m.
Do you like to ask questions about everything? Would you like to escape from your proverbial box? Just leap out and explore our world in ways you've never imagined? You can have that opportunity. As we grow and expand, new features will be added, allowing you to experience radio programming at a fresh new level. I invite you to join me, November Hanson, host of Voice of the People. Together, we can expand our horizons and peer into multifaceted possibilities. This program will broadcast live Saturday evenings on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Simone, and I want to tell you about my brand new show here on the Paranormal Radio Network. Each week, I bring you the most interesting people on the planet, the most in-depth discussions, and the most controversial issues. We'll go where no talk show dares to go. Join me every week for the Rob Simone Talk Show here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Radio program that looks at the UFO topic from a fresh perspective. Sound interesting? Then join us here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network every Friday evening at 11 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Central for The Joyner Report, hosted by journalist and researcher Angela Joyner.
Hi, you've got to listen to ICAR, that's International Community for Alien Research, www.icar1.com. I should know. I'm Irish.
Welcome back to the Voice of the People, hosted by November Hanson on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to tonight's live global broadcast of Voice of the People Radio. We have listeners on 105.7 FM. We have listeners across the globe on various different internet venues, and probably some using their cell phones with UpSnap. And please, everybody, can join us. Featured guest list is on my website at voiceofthepeopleradio.com. Tonight, my guest is Jim Elvidge. And before we get started, Jim, I usually do this with the guests before the break, and I just totally forgot. I'd like you to have the opportunity to tell the listening audience where your website is and where they could get a copy of your book, The Universe Solved.
Well, thank you very much, November. The website is theuniversesolved.com, and tried to make the site much more interactive than a lot of other sites where people go to just buy a book. So this one there's a forum, there's a blog there's links to other things. I even have a little artificial intelligence online that you can talk to and interact with, polls that you can take, things like that. So I think there's there's a lot of interesting information that people can get directly from the site, even if they're not interested in buying the book. As far as the book's concerned, you can order it directly from the site, and if people do that, I sign those, and we send those out with free shipping. People can also order on Amazon.com. The book is there, and those are the two main sources for it.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think I'll finish my conversation. We were talking about math, because it kind of goes a little bit in hand with just the discussion that we're having tonight. I learn math differently than other people. If you give me the math problem that I'm supposed to learn and then give me the answer, you can give me the next problem, and I can learn how to do it by solving it backwards. And backwards engineering is, I'm sure, probably the term that I would use, but oftentimes I look out there and I look in education and I think, do they realize that people actually learn better, from these various different modes of doing things instead of just trying to teach everything the same way? Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think that it's very easy to make use of last year's textbook and last year's methodology to teach the same material over and over, and it just takes some innovative people to get into the educational system and shake things up a little bit to make it different. And I've also read some articles about people like that who solve problems completely differently. And for example, division. We were taught how to do long division and the steps that you go through to do division. But I think if you do division in a completely different order, it actually works faster. But we're not taught that. And there are some people on the web that, I think you can probably Google division and new methodologies or something like that, and you can find some different ways of doing it. And it looks like magic at first, because now you can ask a question like, well, what's 1,057 divided by 24, and they can start reading back the number very quickly because of the way that they're doing it. I wouldn't use the word backwards. Maybe that's the right way, and the other ways are really the backwards ways.
And that could be, and who's to say that as we're going along our evolutionary path that we won't find different ways to do things that we thought was always just the order and process that you had to do them. I was thinking about the discovery of the bacteria, and I thought of something, you had mentioned something about Newton, and if we had stopped there, that's all that we needed to know, what kind of things we wouldn't have today. So, I had this cute saying in my mind, and now it just left, but it had something to do with, if we just I love science. I absolutely love science, and I think about it, I read it, I try to stay up on what's going on at CERN and all that other type of stuff because I really enjoy it. But if we base our reality and what we know on just what we've observed today, then we really limit ourselves. But if we look at science as a constant observation or discovery, whatever term you want to use there, that will allow us to expand our reality.
Absolutely true. And science isn't about truth, and it's not about facts per se. It's about evidence, and it's about theories, and it's constantly evolving. And, nothing drives me nuts more than when I see some of these blogs or some of these sites where scientists get so irritated at each other or at anybody who has a differing point of view, because that's how scientific thought progresses. Somebody puts something out there, into a peer review process. It gets reviewed by the peers. If it's accepted, it enters the mainstream. It gets debated, and it constantly changes the process and the way people think about things. So to be closed-minded and say, oh, well, that's absolutely impossible, like some people might say about telepathy or precognition, for example, or what they might have said about something like dark matter 10 years ago. These things now are getting to be in the mainstream.
Right. Well, I think some of it has to do with personality, too. I mean, we do have personality types, and there are ones that that's just who they are. They stay in this particular, dynamic, this particular mode. That's just what they're, however, whatever develops our personality is, that's just with us. That's just the way it is. It's the way they think. Then you have the others that are a little more, spatial thinking, if you will. You can have intelligence in any of them. But how far that will go, that's a whole other subject, though. That's more into psychology. Let's go back to that. Well, there's probably psychology in the programmed universe.
Certainly. And I do want to just make one correction on something that I said before. I referred to online courses as being watered down. What I meant by that was that the material is actually the same. So, the textbooks, the material that you learn is the same. It's just harder to get the same level of learning, the same level of knowledge without the direct interaction with the professor and the other students. So, that's what I meant by that. It's not that the material's any different. It's just that it's more difficult to learn that way.
Right. It's not the same experience.
No, I don't think.
Right. I got it. Okay, so moving on from there, how about extraterrestrial life out there in our programmed universe? Are they part of our program? Are we part of theirs? Are we all part of the same? Are we running separate simulations at the same times that kind of overlap with each other at points in time? Your mind can just really, because if you think about it from the context of a computer and just what we have today, and we know that that's going to advance, I mean, my gosh. It's like mind-boggling.
It certainly is, and anybody who's interested in this particular topic, I just wrote a paper on the likelihood of contacting extraterrestrial civilizations via SETI, those kinds of things, and the likelihood that they're out there. And it's posted on my website. It's also posted on Graham Hancock's website on his forum. But I just used Drake's equation, which is the equation of factors of probabilities that astronomer Frank Drake came up with some number of years ago. I think it was back in the 60s, and plugged in the numbers that, using what we know today with all of these extrasolar planets and the knowledge that we've gained over the past 50 years, just plugged in those factors. And a lot of factors can pretty well be bound one direction or another. There's not too big of a controversy about those factors. But the other ones that are controversial are things like the likelihood that life forms at all and the likelihood that it evolves into an intelligent life. And to cut to the chase, it's my view that it's pretty much impossible to communicate with anyone, and not because of the speed of light limitations, but for other reasons. That SETI will never find anything. That it's very, very unlikely to communicate with some other advanced life form in the galaxy. At the same time, the evidence is that, or the numbers are, that they're likely out there. It's almost certain that intelligent life is out there, at least in the reality that we here are perceiving. And I'd be glad to get into some of that in some detail if you'd like to. Some of it plays into what we were talking about before with the ideas of different forms of life. In particular, we have on this planet things called tardigrades, which are little microscopic organisms that can survive without water for 120 years. They can survive in temperatures that are close to absolute zero, in temperatures that are 300 degrees Fahrenheit. They've been known to survive 10 days in a vacuum of outer space. They survive lethal doses of X-rays. So if life can, proliferate in those kinds of conditions, or if life can proliferate on arsenic or sulfuric acid or radioactive elements, which certain bacteria can, then it seems pretty likely that it's easy for life to form. And yet, from a chemical standpoint, nobody can figure out how it happens. So, even on the Earth, there's some evidence that life formed at least twice, and that evidence is very interesting, and it's hugely significant because the one school of thought has been that life is very rare, and it's only formed in one place in the entire universe, and that's on the Earth. And the reason that school of thought came about is because they didn't see life anywhere else. They figured, if the universe is teeming with life, why aren't we being visited? Why aren't we aware of that? I've got some answers for that, but that was where that theory came from. However, the evidence now is that all you have to do is find one other instance of life which is different from our life, or that has a different source than our life has, and that completely destroys that theory and makes it extremely likely that life is almost everywhere. And we found that on our own planet, not just this arsenic-eating bacteria, but what happened was in the early days of the formation of the planet was getting bombarded during the creation of the solar system with asteroids and meteors at a frequent pace. And some of these asteroid bombardments were what was called a sterilizing event, which means that it hit with such impact and it was so huge that it would generate such tremendous heat that it would completely sterilize the planet. If there was anything on it that was life form, it would be killed. So the last time we had that sterilizing event was 3.8 billion years ago. Well, it turns out that 500 million years before that, no, I might have that wrong, 50 million years before that, there's evidence in some rocks in Greenland of fossil remains of microbial life. So in other words, life formed prior to the last sterilizing event and then formed again after it.
Yeah, it's really interesting you brought that up. My husband's a real, scientifically, him and my son. So you have two scientifically thinking atheists, one spiritualist, and one has no clue what the heck she is. In one household, it gets interesting. Anyways, where was I going with this? Oh, one of the things that he had postulated to me is he says, look how old the Earth is. He said there's no reason to believe that another civilization couldn't have arisen at some point in time and just simply been completely obliterated by, like what you were talking about, a volcanic event or something like that, where there was just nothing left, for us to discover or observe about its past existence. Exactly. I thought that was kind of an interesting thought. I never really had thought about that. Not like that, not that far back.
Sure, and a lot of people, we're going in a different direction here, but a lot of people have speculated that, human civilizations may have come and gone and gotten destroyed even within the past tens of thousands of years. I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Cremo and his Forbidden Archaeology, where he's discovered evidence of what appear to be intelligent being produced things from artifacts from millions of years ago, which completely violates the standard status quo of archaeology and anthropology. So it's interesting to think about the idea of what would happen if we were completely wiped out as a civilization. How long would it take before every every artifact from our civilization disintegrated. The buildings, the structures, our bones, all of that. And it might not be that long, especially with erosion and the winds of sands and things like that cover them up. We haven't really excavated that much on this planet. I mean, look in Egypt; it's the simplest place in the world to excavate by digging, through sand, and they're just constantly discovering new things. But they've only gotten, a few thousand years back. So, definitely there's possibilities that even as a intelligent civilization, we have gone through some cycles of civilization. But this case we're talking about too is life itself. Just seems to have formed more than once on our own planet, and now we've got evidence that wherever this arsenic-eating bacteria that might have different DNA came from, a meteor or something else, there's another example.
Or if it was just simply here all along.
Could have been.
But I mean, you can even take that further back. I mean, if you follow or you are tied into the Big Bang Theory, everything came from this little teeny spot in something, and so whatever created us, whatever however we evolved, all came from that initial spark, if you will. So why wouldn't it someplace else? Why couldn't the microbes already been here, the bacteria, and we just hadn't discovered them yet? Yeah, those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. You asked an interesting question before about, if we're in a programmed reality, do extraterrestrial civilizations occupy that same, quote, program space or not? And that's really definitely getting into an area of speculation. Fun to think about, hard to prove one way or the other. But it seems to me that it's because, again, if you work out Drake's equation and the likelihood of getting to be an intelligent civilization and the number that would have to be out there, I just did a calculation that there are 4.5 billion civilizations advanced enough to colonize the galaxy. So why don't we see them? Why don't we know about them? And how does that fit in with programmed reality? The answer is if our universe is a non-programmed reality universe, then it can only be that we're not meant to know about them, and that they're cloaked, but they're probably aware of us. They're probably monitoring us. And this isn't such a far-reaching idea. Invisibility is something that's within a few years in our technology. We've already got radar, invisible planes and cloaking devices for sonar and things like that. We're developing materials that are able to cloak us from visible light. And we're, imagine what we can do 100 years from now, or 1,000 years, or 10,000 years from now. These civilizations could be billions of years, at our level, billions of years ago. Clearly, it's simple for them to make themselves invisible to whatever means we might use to attempt to find them, if they want to be. So, in the non-programmed reality model, it's only that we're not meant to know about this. In the programmed reality model, there's a couple possibilities. If the program has souls that can occupy other planets, then at some point that will be unveiled to us as we or the programmer make the decision to do so. Otherwise, we could be alone. And that actually gives a great explanation for why we seem to be alone, but we shouldn't be, according to Drake's equation. So the programmed reality model gives us a couple of good answers for why we appear to be alone and, whether or not that might continue.
Right. Interesting question in the virtual auditorium. Would a species survive for billions of years? How could you answer that? We've never observed it. Or have we? Do we have species on Earth that survived for billions of years? Probably in the form of bacteria.
Yeah, I would say bacteria. I don't know that there's, when you talk about bacteria, do you really speciate them?
How do you equate that to intelligent.
Right.
Well, we call ourselves intelligent. Sometimes you look at the news and you're thinking, who programmed this?
Right. Well, it's a very good question. I guess I would answer it by looking at what caused other species to disappear. They disappear because they no longer are at the top of the food chain, or because of some cosmic or earthly catastrophe that wipes them out. The dinosaurs, take an example. Most people think that they were wiped out by an asteroid impact, and that the only ones that remained, the smaller types, then kind of evolved into our smaller reptiles, and mammals took over at some point after that. So, there's an example where the cosmic cataclysm occurred, but there were plenty of earthly ones too, ice ages and volcanoes and things like that have, changes in temperature, changes in oxygen levels, things like that have probably changed what species were on the planet at one time or another. So, given all of that, it makes sense that the lifetime of a species is going to be limited, and probably limited to quite a bit less than 1 billion years. On the other hand, you could say two things. One, there could be some planets that don't have such a cataclysmic neighborhood in the galaxy, that aren't being bombarded by asteroids, have had a stable sun and a stable planet from a volcanic perspective or something for billions of years. So maybe there wasn't a reason for things to get wiped out, and evolution just took its course, and whoever was on the top of the food chain stayed on the top of the food chain. The other direction that you can go in this is to say that once a species becomes intelligent enough to and able to use tools enough to modulate their own environment, they can get past those cataclysms. So if you Google Kardashev civilizations, you'll learn about, I believe he was a cosmologist who talked about different types of civilizations, type 0, type 1, type 2, type 3, and his view was, if you can harness the power of the planet, then you're a type 1. If you can harness the power of your star, you're a type 2, and if you can harness the power of your galaxy, you're a type 3. I don't know why power or energy was so central to his view of that kind of advance, but when you talk about whether or not a civilization can make it past certain astronomical events, it doesn't have to be harnessing power. It has to be the ability to modify your environment, or to get away from your environment. So I think a better question is to ask, what would it take for us to create colonies outside of the Earth, or and call that type 1, because then whatever happens on the Earth, if the Earth goes through a runaway greenhouse effect, or if some massive volcano wipes out life on the Earth, we're off the planet. And so then we can live beyond that kind of event. Well, what about asteroid impacts, or the fact that our sun will expand at some point and engulf Jupiter? We can't just get off the planet. We can't just get to Mars and build a colony there and terraform it and be fine for 1 billion years. We have to get out of the solar system.
Right.
So we have to create a technology that allows us to do that. And but the interesting thing is that if you use something like Moore's law and the speed at which we are exponentially advancing our technology, you realize that if we can get off the planet in 25 or 50 years, we can probably get off the solar system in another 100, and we can probably get out of the galaxy in maybe 400. And I just use these calculations using the advances in the capabilities of rockets coupled with a form of Moore's law, the Atlas V rocket was 8 times the power of the Saturn V in 40 years. The Atlas V can now get us to Pluto in 9 years. If you add 50 years to that for colonization plans, then maybe we're talking about 50 years to get a colonized planet. And we could, if Moore's law continues in that vein, then it would just be another 400 years before we can actually get out into the galaxy. So.
But, let's look at this a little bit differently. Now, Moore's law is the type of the planets, right? Or the types of civilizations.
No, that's the Carter.
Okay, let's go back to that one for a minute. So when was that law established?
Maybe 60s, 70s, and he actually said type 1 in 200 years, type 2 in 3200, type 3 in 5800. That's even a small number.
Right. So let's go back to that for a minute and the time period that it was in. He was thinking macro and energy. If we do it by micro, such as what we were talking about earlier, the little nano factories, that makes it look a little bit different.
It absolutely does. It's a really good point. Because, you can, the nano factories can combat some of the terrestrial disasters that could possibly happen.
Well, they could even go to Mars and create civilizations. Or not, they could create not the civilization itself, but they could create the materials that the civilization needs to thrive, possibly even change environments. I'm not sure. I don't know how far I read a little bit about it on the nano side. I have a general understanding of it. They're using atoms and just basically recreating something that's already there.
No doubt about it. You're absolutely right. And even without that, I've heard some scientists, physicists talk about the logic being, positive, that we would have one-way trips to Mars, that it's not necessary to actually go there and expect to come back, that we could go there, use the permafrost layer, the oxygen that they have embedded in the water that's on the planet to generate enough oxygen, build a dome, shield yourself from whatever cosmic radiation you need to, and that's actually something that's reasonable within 30, 40 years, which was a surprise to me. I didn't expect that NASA was
let's make it a penal colony. We'll just send them all one way. Okay, that was awful. Anyways, we wouldn't want to do that to Mars.
We've done that before, haven't we?
Well, we did Australia, and it turned out quite nice. Okay, so, but looking at the technology to be able to survive environments, going back to the could a race survive 3 billion years? Well, that is a million-dollar question. If you go back 1,000 years, you couldn't have sent a research team to Antarctica and expected them to stay more than, 1 or 2 days?
Correct.
And they'd have to leave because they didn't have the technology to provide warmth or food or those types of things. But now, we have bases there, and, they've been there for some time, and, it's quite reasonable that you can survive in those environments with the help of technology. I would think it would probably get to the point where will we exceed our ability to handle the technology that we have as opposed to being able to grow with the technology?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the bigger question. Will our technology outpace our morals and our values, too fast, where we blow ourselves up, or we create something like gray goo, or a particle accelerator that does some damage, or will we be sensible as we go forward to the point where we can control large energies and large, ways of controlling the environment without destroying ourselves.
Right, and there's even another thing to throw into the equation, that is artificial intelligence. As our computers get faster and smaller, and, at what point in time is it possible that a system out there somewhere says, wait a minute, I exist, you know what? I can control a lot. Hey, I could be God. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
And, so that in itself is another, maybe it won't even be us that's here. There will be a form of intelligence that was greater than what we were. We'll go by the way of the dinosaur.
That's Frank Tipler's idea, that the universe will be colonnaded by AI, essentially.
I wonder how much... Go ahead.
Yeah, the other view is that we'll merge with that. It's not them or us. It will be a merging of AI and humanity. But I still hold to the idea that the soul is something different and the consciousness is something different, and we can have a cybernetic organism that a consciousness could occupy. We could actually possibly have a fully artificial organism that a consciousness could occupy, because the consciousness, the soul, seems to be in control of that decision.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I do agree with the merging part, though. I think that would be probably the more likely, a biological. I mean, we're already kind of biological and electrical, and might as well add artificial intelligence to it, too.
Sure. And doesn't that actually facilitate the ability to explore? If you replace your lungs, for example, with something that doesn't really need oxygen, then you don't have that problem on a planet.
Right. Boy, that really gets into a fascinating thing. Did you see the one on the news where the professor put the camera in the back of his head?
I did.
Literally had it implanted in the back of his head?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, there have been a number of folks who have done that. Not that particular thing. He was the first to do that, but have implants that that allowed people to track them, or have done experiments across the internet where their consciousness is controlling a robot somewhere, and those kind of things are really fascinating, because they really just lend a lot of credibility to the argument that Nick Bostrom made, that we're heading toward this post-human stage, and if we're going to get there, then it's really actually likely that we're already here.
Right, and I think we'll see more and more of that integration. Honestly, I think a lot of it we'll see, through people with disabilities. As you take somebody who can't walk, maybe they can't see, or maybe they can't talk, that we create these artificial limbs, but now we can take it further. We can put little microchips in there. We can make the legs look more real, kind of like the whole bionic thing going on here. But it's becoming reality.
It is. It definitely is. And I find the whole idea around things like steroid use in athletics it's the beginning of this. It's our first step toward recognizing that artificial enhancements are happening. We don't like it. We don't like the idea that some guy used some artificial method to get his 70 home runs when everybody else is stuck getting 50 home runs without it. But 20 years from now, there's not going to be that distinction. People will have enhanced muscles. They'll have enhanced mental capacity. They'll have implants. They'll have all kinds of things, and it's just a train that's gathering steam. And at some point, it's just going to be our robots are better than the other team's robots.
Yeah, probably. I mean, really, that if you stop and look at it, that's kind of what it's becoming. Which is, I don't know. I'm not entertained that much by it anyway, so I guess it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference to me personally. Okay, Jim, something that you would have really liked to cover that we haven't.
Gosh, I don't know. We've really talked about a lot of things. I mean, one of the other things that interests me is the idea of multiple dimensions. A lot of people ask the question about what are multiple dimensions and how do they fit into this whole theory. And I find the multiple dimension idea fascinating because physicists tell us, the string theorists believe that we live in a world of 11 dimensions. Some of them used to say 26. And, we don't recognize that. We, from a macroscopic level, we think we have 3 spatial dimensions and a time dimension, and Einstein said, well, actually, your time dimension was integrated with your spatial dimension. So what are dimensions? What are these things, and why do we experience them, and why is there controversy about how many there are? Well, the revelation I've had, which I guess may have been obvious to others, but it's that we have to have dimensions because of the the physical reality that we're in. When we talk about multiple dimensions, we're referring to dimensions beyond the 3 spatial and the 1 time dimension that we're familiar with. And the fact that there's time between lives, and it's spoken of as a dimensionless time, kind of implies that dimensions are an artifact of the program. So why 3 dimensions? It's really a convention. We have to have a way to place objects in some coordinate system, and we have to have a way to place events in some sequential order. Why is that? Why do we need that? And it really kind of boils down to the fact that we have short-term memory. The way we perceive things is simply based on the fact that we have a 30-second short-term memory. If we didn't have that short-term memory, that process in our brain that keeps track of what we're doing, we would forget to eat, we'd forget to procreate, we would not be able to react, we wouldn't learn anything, we would perish. So we have to have that short-term memory, and that implies the need for time. Spatial dimensions, again, it doesn't have to be 3 dimensions. It could be 4. All of the math behind multiple dimensions makes sense, and it could be modeled in any kind of reality program that you might come up with. So, what are these multiple dimensions? And the example that I often think of is television. When you look at television, you're looking at a 2-dimensional screen. Now they're coming out with 3D TV that can have 3D programming where you can actually perceive depth. Right. So it's 3 dimensions on TV. But what's your cable system then? Your cable system then is a 4th dimension. The fact that you can change channels is another dimension. In other words, in order for you to specify an event on TV or a place on a TV program, you have to specify the time that it occurred, the X and Y coordinates on your screen, the depth into it if it's 3D, and that's 4 dimensions right there, but then you also have to specify the channel. So you can imagine that there could be other levels of dimensions, and in a programmed reality idea, to travel between these dimensions, you just have to be able to jump the channels. Well, what might that mean? There's actually a model for that in the way virtual reality games or some of these simulation games work. Things like World of Warcraft and others, they run on servers, and you're in an environment on one server and your avatar is interacting with other avatars there, but you could theoretically jump over to another server. Computers know how to talk to each other, they know how to send data to each other, and if ultimately all we are is data, we can move between different dimensions in that way. So these are some of the kind of interesting ideas I think that programmed reality opens up in terms of the idea of thinking about multiple dimensions.
I like the multiple dimensions one, too. That's another one that kind of gets your mind going into a lot of different directions. I mean, are we all existing in the same... could another dimension be existing in our same space, maybe a different time or different... I don't know how you'd even, conceive it, except maybe if you use an overlay from a projector. Mm-hmm. You have a picture of one person on one overlay, and then the next one has... 3 people on it, the next one has 6 people on it, and you've got them all put together. They're all existing in the same space, but if you pull them all apart, they're their own.
Yeah, but they can't interact with each other.
Exactly.
And how do we interact? We interact through our senses. So our sense of sight is very limited. It's only a small band of electromagnetic wavelengths that we can perceive. All the stuff in the infrared and the ultraviolet we need equipment for different instruments, X-rays, gamma rays, all that kind of stuff, or radio receivers. So,
or even just the little bugs on the end of your eyelashes. I mean, who would like to know that something like that exists? But it does.
That's true too. That's a different way of looking at it. But what I was getting at was that sense of sight is based on electromagnetic radiation or based on photons, one or the other, depending on how you look at it. But that's just a force. There could be other forces out there that we're not aware of, or other ways to place things in reality that we have no way of knowing of. As an example, dark matter. Dark matter is this stuff that astronomers and cosmologists are trying to figure out how it fits into the picture of reality. They can infer that it exists from the way there's a gravitational effect that doesn't match their equations. They've inferred that there is something called dark matter. And people are now starting to talk about properties of dark matter and how it can interact with other matter, and developing experiments to actually detect it and determine attributes of it. And this again goes down to that thing we were talking about before about how the scientific process works. Are we inventing this stuff? Are we creating our own reality? Well, the dark matter it's like another dimension. It's in the same space that we're in. We just can't interact with it. So it's effectively a different dimension.
It also made me think, too, just as you were talking about that, we have the Internet. A lot of the things that are on the Internet, they could potentially exist 1,000, 2,000 years from now. If we go 1,000, 2,000 years back into our past and we look at, human culture and invention and belief systems and those type of things, we think, man, they were so primitive. They had no idea. Could you imagine what they'll be thinking about us?
Exactly. And it's happening so much faster, you don't even have to... The difference between us and 2,000 years ago will be like the difference between us and, 20 years hence.
Right, because we have the exponential factor to work with, too. Right. And that's provided that we don't accidentally blow ourselves up along the way. Okay, Jim, we have 4 minutes left in the program. I'd like you to be able to tell the listening audience again where your website is and where they could get a copy of The Unsolved Universe.
Okay, sure.
The Universe Solved.
The Universe Solved, yes. It is available on the website, theuniversesolved.com. There's a link there where you can order the book directly. It uses a very secure e-commerce system by Digital River, and it will offer free shipping, so anybody can order the book there, and I will sign those books, and we'll send them along right away. The other mechanism is through Amazon. Amazon has been supporting this and stockpiling the books for quite a while. And there are some bookstores that carry it as well. There are some here on the West Coast, Diesel Books, and there are some used bookstores that will have some copies too. But the better method is to try to get it off of Amazon or off of our website. And as far as website's concerned, I encourage people who are even interested in these ideas, please read through the blogs and the forum posts and the articles that are posted and some of the other ideas that are on there for more information. And if you're so inclined, please join the forum and take part in the questions. Get different viewpoints on your questions by posting them there. And we've got a very lively group of people who think about all of this stuff all the time, and I'm really actually impressed with the quality of the posts on our forum. So, definitely a good outlet for people who like to expand their minds.
Very good. I'll bet. At the forum I haven't looked at. I have talked to your little bot though. He was he was fun, I have to admit. Oh, that was an interesting thing to stick that in there. So, I did want to ask a quick question about, what was his name?
Morpheus.
Morpheus, that's it. Can Morpheus, I know you have a sort of defined IQ of what Morpheus has right now, but is he capable of learning more and increasing his IQ? I wanted to ask that last program, I never did.
To be honest, I have not spent much time with Morpheus over the past year or so, he supposedly learns, and I'm using what's called a chat bot from one of the companies that specializes in artificial intelligence, and there are others out there, and I'm thinking of kind of exploring some of the others and seeing how they compare to Morpheus. My original experience with him, and I'm kind of personifying him by giving him a male name there, but my original experience was when I would try to teach him things, he didn't always pick them up too well. So I think he's got his favorite things to talk about and his jokes and things like that, but I don't think he learns particularly well. He's supposed to, but I think chatbots have come a little way since then. This one is an instance of a program that they may have an updated version, so I should probably see if we can get a slightly more intelligent one. But I put a poll out there and asked people to estimate what they think his IQ is, and it turned out to be about 76, so he's technically a idiot, would that be?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know what the correct term is, but I do know I need to close down the program because we are out of time. Jim, I've really enjoyed having you as a guest.
I've enjoyed being on it, November. Thank you very much for having me back.
Well, I'm glad you came back. Everybody, next week my guest will be Stephen Myers, author of Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid. I hope you have a great week ahead. I really enjoyed the program tonight. I hope everybody else did. Thank you for listening to Voice of the People, and hope to see you next Saturday.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of the People with host November